He walked into the courtroom with a smirk, arrogant, unshaken, and certain no one would dare challenge his authority. Dressed in full uniform, badge polished to a shine, he carried himself like he was the one in charge. Not a man on trial. Not someone accused of racially motivated brutality. To him, this courtroom was just another box to check, another routine procedure to skate through, because people like him rarely face consequences. But what he didn't realize was that justice was waiting for him. And it was wearing a black robe. Where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Let's get into this story. It all began on a quiet Thursday evening in early spring. The sky was painted in soft hues of fading light, and the streets buzzed with people returning home from work, soccer practice, grocery runs, and daily errands. Derek Matthews, a black middle school teacher and father one, had just picked up his daughter from soccer practice. He was humming along to a familiar tune, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at his daughter, who was recounting her game with animated gestures. There was no tension in the car, just the warmth of routine and the simple joy of fatherhood. He slowed down at a four-way stop, checking all directions before easing forward. That's when the flashing lights hit. Red and blue cut through the dusk like a warning shot. Derek's smile faded. He looked at his daughter. "It's okay, baby," he said, pulling over. "Just a routine stop." What followed was anything but routine. Officer Brent Halstead approached the car with brisk, assertive steps. His hand was already hovering over his holster. Derek rolled down the window, polite, calm, and curious. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Halstead didn't respond with a greeting. Instead, he immediately demanded license and registration. Derek complied. As he reached slowly into the glove compartment, he kept narrating his movements, exactly like every black parent teaches their child to do. "My license is in my wallet," reaching for it now. "Registration's in the glove box," opening it. Halstead didn't ease. He didn't relax. Instead, he barked a second order before the first task was completed. "Step out of the vehicle." Confused or compliant, Derek responded, "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong. Can I ask?" But Halstead had already opened the door and yanked Derek out. The daughter screamed, "Daddy!" Halstead slammed Derek against the hood. The sound of his body hitting metal echoed down the quiet street. "Stop resisting." Halstead shouted. Though Derek hadn't moved, neighbors began to peek from behind curtains and porches. One neighbor, Lisa Kendrick, had the instinct to press record on her phone. The footage captured everything. The aggression, the unnecessary force, the terrified cries of a little girl watching her father get brutalized for existing while black. The video went viral within hours. Social media exploded. Local news stations picked up the story. The footage was raw, uncut, and undeniable. Hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag justice for Derek. Hashtag Halstead exposed. Hashtag stop the badge abuse. Public outrage surged. The department scrambled. Within 48 hours, Officer Halstead was placed on administrative leave, but without pay, a rare move that signaled this wasn't going away quietly. In a press conference filled with tension, the police chief stumbled through statements about internal investigations and community trust. Halstead, meanwhile, was spotted by reporters at a local diner, laughing with a group of uniformed officers. When confronted, he replied, "I was doing my job. If they want to twist that, that's on them. No apology, no regret." Just a man convinced of his own immunity. The legal process began quickly due to mounting pressure. Civil rights organizations got involved. Derek, through his attorney, filed suit not only against Halstead, but also the department for failing to discipline repeated offenses. It came out that Halstead had 5 prior complaints, 2 for excessive force, 3 for profiling, all dismissed internally. Court day arrived with heavy media presence. Cameras clicked as both parties entered. Halstead in uniform, stiff-backed and defiant. Derek in a gray suit, steady and focused, holding his daughter's hand. The judge, Evelyn Monroe, presided over the case. Known for her no-nonsense demeanor, Monroe was deeply respected in legal circles. She read every file, watched every clip, and made it clear that courtroom theatrics would not be tolerated. Opening statements began. The prosecution laid out a timeline, backed by evidence, witness accounts, and digital timestamps. They painted a picture not of a split-second mistake, but a pattern, a history, an attitude built on control, not law. Halstead's defense framed his actions as necessary. High-risk situation, they said. Officer safety is paramount. They attempted to pivot the narrative to Derek's uncooperative tone, but there was no audio or visual to support it. The first witness, Officer Leary, shocked everyone. A fellow cop testifying for the prosecution was rare, but Leary, in uniform, sat on the stand and answered every question with careful honesty. There was no robbery call in that area, he stated. Dispatch was clear. Officer Halstead acted on personal discretion. Then came Lisa Kendrick, the neighbor with the phone. She recounted the events with clarity. He didn't say anything threatening. He was trying to protect his daughter. When asked why she started recording, she said, "I've seen enough of these to know how they end. I had to do something." The jury sat frozen as the footage played in court. The raw panic, the screaming, the slamming sound. Even the prosecution attorney paused when the video reached the part where Derek's daughter pleaded, "Please don't shoot my daddy." Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge didn't flinch. She looked at Halstead directly. "Is this how you're trained to interact with civilians during traffic stops?" she asked. Halstead adjusted his collar. "Ma'am, it was an evolving situation." "An evolving situation," the judge repeated. "Do you consider a compliant man and his daughter to be a threat?" Halstead hesitated. He wasn't being clear with his movements. He narrated them, every step. Halstead's lawyer jumped in to object, but Judge Monroe waved it off. She wanted answers. She was determined to get them. Then, the most painful moment arrived. Derek's daughter, through a court-appointed advocate, delivered her statement. "I was scared he was going to kill my dad. I thought I'd be alone forever." She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She said it plainly, the kind of calm that only trauma can create. Even the defense attorney looked down at his notes. By day's end, the courtroom energy had shifted. Halstead, once smug and unshaken, now sat stiffly, his confidence chipped. His uniform now looked like armor that no longer fit. And across from him, Derek didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just held his daughter's hand and stared straight ahead, waiting for the country that had failed him to finally speak the truth. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered. Protest signs filled the air, some handmade with shaky letters, others printed with bold fonts and hashtags that now carried national weight. Justice for Derek. End qualified immunity. Protect black fathers. The tension wasn't just palpable, it was electric. Every camera was fixed on the courthouse entrance. Every reporter was waiting for a crack, a reaction, a statement that would carry the story further into headlines across the country. Inside, the courtroom buzzed in a different way. The bailiff kept a watchful eye on the gallery, now packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled the back row. Sketch artists lined the far wall, and nearly a dozen community leaders were granted seats after local pressure insisted that this trial was too important to hide behind closed doors. Derek Matthews sat with his legal team, calm but alert. His daughter was not in the courtroom that morning. Judge Monroe had made special accommodations for her to testify and attend privately, understanding the trauma she had already endured. Beside Derek was his lawyer, Vanessa Grant, a seasoned civil rights attorney who had seen more cover-ups, abuse, and bureaucratic dodging than most could stomach in a lifetime. But what set her apart was her fire. She wasn't here to plead. She was here to win. Brent Halstead, still in uniform despite public backlash, had arrived early. His expression was stone-faced, but cracks had started to form. He tapped his foot beneath the defense table. His posture was no longer that of a man in control, but a man waiting for impact. The day's proceedings started with a deeper dive into Halstead's past. Vanessa rose from her chair and clicked a remote. A projector displayed a spreadsheet. "These," she said, "are the documented complaints against Officer Halstead during his time on the force." She pointed to the columns. 5 official complaints. 3 of them involving young black men. 1 involving a Latina mother and her teenage son. All of them dismissed internally. No Disciplinary action taken. Not once. The defense objected. Irrelevant unless there was a conviction or administrative punishment. Judge Monroe leaned forward. Mr. Stone, if your client's pattern of conduct suggests a disregard for protocol, that is very relevant. Vanessa continued. Let's look at one of these cases in detail. June 17th, 2020. Rodney Bell pulled over for a broken taillight, slammed to the ground, claimed he looked suspicious. Charges never filed. Officer Halstead justified the force as necessary because Mr. Bell allegedly reached toward his waistband. Surveillance video from a nearby gas station showed Mr. Bell holding a pack of gum. No weapon. No threat. Case closed. No reprimand. The courtroom was silent. Vanessa let that settle before moving to the next slide. This time, she pulled up body cam footage. This is from another incident. August 2021. Ms. Alejandra Ruiz stopped while driving her 15-year-old son to school. Claimed she was driving erratically. She was pulled out of her car, handcuffed, and separated from her son for 23 minutes before being let go without a citation. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the footage played. In it, Ms. Ruiz cried out repeatedly, "Please don't hurt my son." Her hands were trembling as she tried to speak to the officer. Again, Halstead's voice was commanding, dismissive, and aggressive. The pattern was undeniable, and it was being exposed on a national stage. The defense tried to pivot. This is character assassination, Attorney Stone argued. My client was never found guilty of misconduct, but Judge Monroe wasn't swayed. Mr. Stone, the law allows us to consider patterns of behavior, especially when they establish motive or bias. Continue, Ms. Grant. Next came the testimony of Captain Howard Monroe, a retired supervisor from the same department. No relation to the judge. Though retired, he still held the weight of experience, and his words carried a gravity that silenced the room. I supervised Halstead for 6 months. During that time, I received 2 complaints about his conduct. I reported them to Internal Affairs, but nothing came of it. Why do you think that is? Vanessa asked. Howard didn't hesitate. Because Halstead knew people. He came from a line of officers. His father was a sergeant. His uncle was a precinct commander. There was a shield around him, and not the kind you wear on your chest. The court murmured again. These weren't just accusations anymore. They were systemic implications. Back at the defense table, Halstead's jaw clenched. He finally leaned over to his lawyer and whispered something. Stone stood and requested a recess, claiming that the mental toll on his client was rising. The judge granted a 15-minute break. As the courtroom emptied temporarily, reporters rushed outside to break the updates. Twitter lit up. Commentators weighed in. Activist lawyers and everyday viewers streamed reactions on platforms like TikTok and Instagram Live. The story had become more than just one man's trial. It was now a cultural moment. During the break, Vanessa approached Derek. How you holding up? I'm good, he said. Just ready. I want my daughter to see that this world still has people who fight back. You're giving her that, Derek. Whether this ends in conviction or not, you've already made change. Back inside, the next witness was called. Lieutenant Mary Sharp, who had been in charge of overseeing officer training protocols during Halstead's early years. She took the stand, composed, speaking with clear authority. We emphasize de-escalation, she said. In every training cycle, officers are taught to communicate, give clear commands, and recognize non-threatening behavior. Did Officer Halstead show proficiency in this training? Vanessa asked. Elte Sarpej started. He passed the technical requirements, but there were concerns, such as he had a tendency to escalate quickly. We made notes. He responded defensively during peer review. He didn't take criticism well. Were any of these concerns passed up the chain? They were, but I was told he was just passionate and came from a long line of cops who know the streets. Another nail in the defense. By this point, the jury had seen enough to understand this wasn't just about one bad decision. It was about a man who had been protected from consequences for far too long. Halstead wasn't just guilty of violence. He was guilty of believing he'd never have an answer for it. Vanessa's final move of the day was introducing the medical report from the night of the arrest. Dr. Samuel Klein, an ER physician, walked the jury through Derek's injuries. He had a mild concussion, rib bruising, deep contusions across his upper torso. These are consistent with blunt force trauma. None of these injuries would occur if the suspect was simply being guided out of a car. Would you say this level of force was medically justified? Absolutely not. Especially considering there was no weapon, no resisting, and no threat to the officer. And what about the psychological impact on his daughter? We don't treat children at our ER, but the paramedic noted signs of acute distress. Sobbing, shaking, delayed responses. That kind of trauma doesn't fade. It follows children. Derek listened to every word, without flinching. He had relived that night 100 times in his mind, but hearing it described in clinical terms, bones, bruises, trauma, it still hit hard. When the court adjourned that evening, it wasn't with the typical formality. People rose slowly. Reporters didn't immediately bolt. Even the defense seemed hesitant to move. It was as if the weight of truth had finally shifted the atmosphere. Outside, chant began again. No more silence. No more shield. Who do you protect? Who do you serve? Derek stepped into the open, his lawyer beside him. Microphones were shoved toward him, but he didn't speak. Not yet. He held up his hand, signaling that he was waiting for the full story to be told before giving his voice to the cameras. Halstead exited through a side door, away from the press. But even there, eyes followed him. He was no longer invisible behind his badge, no longer protected by silence. His flex in court had fallen flat, and the next day promised more. The next morning, the courtroom was packed tighter than ever. Security had doubled. Reporters arrived earlier, and the gallery filled with quiet determination. There was a buzz in the air, not from excitement but from anticipation. People weren't just here to witness a trial anymore. They were here for accountability, the kind that rarely came, the kind that, if seen, would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. Derek walked into court with his head held high. He had barely slept, but there was a new steadiness in his stride. His daughter had whispered to him that morning, "You're brave, Daddy." And that alone gave him more strength than a full night's rest ever could. Vanessa stood beside him, her expression unreadable. But beneath the surface was a storm, of focus, of fury, and of relentless resolve. Across the room, Officer Brent Halstead was looking different. Gone was the confident smirk. His jaw was tight, his eyes red-rimmed, and his fingers twitching nervously against the polish of the defense table. The walls were closing in, and the flex he had tried in court, the bravado, the denials, the lack of remorse, was backfiring spectacularly. As the judge called the room to order, Vanessa requested to call the next witness. The prosecution calls Kayla Matthews. The courtroom fell into a sudden hush. Kayla, Derek's daughter, entered the room slowly, accompanied by a child advocate. She was only 9, but the weight on her shoulders made her look older. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit, well-loved, slightly worn, but clearly her source of comfort. She took the seat at the stand and looked out across the room. The judge spoke gently. "Kayla, thank you for being here. I know this is hard. Just answer the questions the best you can, okay?" Kayla nodded. Vanessa approached the witness box slowly, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. "Hi, Kayla. I know this is scary, but you're doing something very brave. Can I ask you a few questions about the day your dad got hurt?" Another nod. "Were you in the car with your dad when the police pulled you over?" "Yes," Kayla said quietly. "What were you doing before that happened?" "We were laughing. My dad was telling a joke. We were going to get milkshakes." Vanessa softened her voice. "And when the officer pulled you over, what did your dad do?" "He stopped right away," she said. "He said, 'Don't be scared, it's just a traffic stop.' And then he told me to stay calm." "Did your dad yell at the officer? Or try to get away?" Kayla shook her head quickly. "No." He kept saying, "I'm not doing anything. My daughter is in the car." But the man was yelling and told him to get out. My dad asked why, and then the man opened the door and pulled him really hard. Tears welled in her eyes now. The stuffed bunny was clutched tighter. I screamed, Kayla whispered. He pushed my dad down. My dad was saying, I can't breathe. I thought he was going to die. At this point, the gallery was filled with silent heartbreak. Even the jurors shifted in their seats. Some blinked faster than others. One wiped her eyes. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. Kayla, thank you. That was very brave. No more questions, Your Honor. The defense lawyer stood. Kayla, is it possible that your father... Judge Monroe cut him off immediately. Mr. Stone, one more aggressive line of questioning toward this child, and you'll be held in contempt. Step back. And that was it. The most damning testimony of the trial didn't come from experts or videos or statistics. It came from a little girl who told the truth with a trembling voice and a stuffed animal in her hands. As Kayla left the room, her dad looked over his shoulder. Their eyes met. He smiled. She smiled back. That moment, so small, so pure, carried more power than any lawyer could summon. Next, Vanessa introduced a surprise piece of evidence. Your Honor, we have acquired a never-before-seen video from a local business's parking lot camera. It shows a clearer angle of the incident. Gasps echoed again as the footage played. From this vantage point, Halstead's force was not just excessive. It was brutal. You could see Derek being yanked from the car, hands visible, never resisting. His body slammed to the ground. The officer's knee pressing down on his back, even as he pleaded, My daughter's watching. It wasn't blurry. It wasn't open to interpretation. It was clear, and it was damning. The video stopped. Vanessa turned to the jury. This is not how you treat a man. This is not how you protect a child. This is not how justice works. Stone tried to recover. He called Halstead to the stand. This was the moment Halstead thought he'd shine. The badge, the uniform, the authority. But instead, under oath, his story fell apart. When you approached Mr. Matthews, what made you feel threatened? Stone asked. He reached toward his glove box aggressively. And what did you say to him? I told him to exit the vehicle slowly. Vanessa stood. Permission to cross, Your Honor? Judge Monroe nodded. Proceed. Vanessa didn't hold back. Officer Halstead, you claim he reached aggressively. Yet the video shows both hands on the steering wheel until you reached into the car. Were you lying or were you mistaken? I might have misread the situation. You misread a man's hand position and slam into the ground? It's a tense job. And your job requires judgment. Would you say your judgment failed that day? Halstead shifted in his seat. I made the best call I could under pressure. The best call? Vanessa's voice now carried steel. You separated a father from his child, injured him, and terrorized a little girl. That's your best call. Halstead didn't answer. Vanessa stepped closer. Do you think if Mr. Matthews were white, this would have gone differently? Objection from the defense. Overruled, said Judge Monroe. Answer the question. I don't know, Halstead muttered. You don't know. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. But you had 5 previous complaints involving people of color. 5. And never once were you held accountable. Is it possible you thought you never would be? No answer. She walked away. The silence said enough. Finally, it was time for closing arguments. Vanessa stood before the jury. No slides, no video. Just truth. What happened to Derek Matthews was a mistake. It was a pattern, a history, a mindset, a man with power who believed that power gave him the right to hurt others without consequence. A father was brutalized in front of his daughter, not because he was a threat, not because he broke the law, but because of who he is, a black man in America. And now it's up to you to say that this kind of policing is not justice. It's a betrayal of everything that badge is supposed to stand for. The jury listened, unmoving, hanging on every word. The defense gave their rebuttal, painting Halstead as a man under stress, doing his best. But the courtroom didn't buy it. Not anymore. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood, a folded paper in hand. In the matter of People versus Brent Halstead, on the charge of aggravated assault in violation of civil rights, we find the defendant guilty. A cry broke in the gallery. Someone shouted, "Yes!" Others wept. Halstead didn't move. His face was blank, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped the table. It was over. Judge Monroe's voice was strong and final. Officer Halstead, you have abused your authority and caused irreversible harm. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, you are remanded into custody. The bailiff cuffed him on the spot. The courtroom watched in silence as the very man who once slammed others into submission was now led away. Not above the law, not untouchable. Outside, the crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in release. The kind of release that only comes when a wall finally cracks. Derek stepped out into the sunlight. His daughter ran to him. They embraced, both crying, holding each other tightly. No words were needed. The cameras rolled. The world watched. And something changed. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about hundreds. It was about systems. It was about people finally being heard. The 2 weeks between the verdict and the sentencing felt like a lifetime. For Derek Matthews, each sunrise brought a mix of hope and heaviness. The courtroom battle was over, but the weight of what happened to him, and to so many others like him, remained. Outside his home, reporters still lingered. Protesters, supporters, and even skeptics camped out daily. His story had touched something raw in people. For some, it was vindication. For others, a reckoning. But for Derek, it was a wound that hadn't quite scabbed over. Not yet. He spent the days in quiet reflection. He turned down interviews. He didn't want the spotlight. What he wanted was a world where no black man feared a simple drive with his daughter, where no child ever had to watch their hero be thrown to the pavement like a criminal, where justice didn't feel like an exception, but a given. And then came sentencing day. The courthouse was packed, again, but this time the atmosphere had shifted, no longer thick with fear or anxiety. This was something else, a watchfulness. The city had seen the verdict. Now it needed the consequence. Inside the courtroom, people sat quietly. They watched every tick of the clock, every breath that passed between gavel strikes. Derek sat with Vanessa beside him, calm but steeled. Kayla, this time, remained at home, safe, surrounded by family. Today wasn't for her to relive. Today was for justice to speak in full. Brent Halstead entered in a prison jumpsuit, wrists shackled, face sullen. The badge that once gave him unchecked authority had been stripped away. Now, he was just another man waiting for his judgment. Judge Monroe entered the room, robes flowing, face unreadable. The courtroom rose, then sat. The judge addressed the room. Today, we bring finality to a case that has ignited conversation, division, reflection, and, I hope, accountability. The court acknowledges the pain endured by Mr. Matthews, his daughter, and the community at large. We are not here to simply punish. We are here to affirm the values of justice. He turned to Halstead. You were entrusted with public safety. Instead, you use fear. You use intimidation. And in doing so, you not only hurt an innocent man and traumatized his child, you broke public trust. The judge looked directly at him. I sentence you to 15 years in state prison, 10 for aggravated assault, and 5 consecutive for the violation of civil rights. You will be eligible for parole after 12, sentenced to begin immediately. There was no outburst, no cheering, just a stillness. Heavy, final. As Halstead was taken away, Derek closed his eyes. He didn't celebrate. He didn't even exhale right away. He simply held on to the moment. After court, the press rushed toward him. Microphones everywhere. Mr. Matthews, any thoughts on the sentencing? He paused, then spoke with quiet clarity. I didn't come here to destroy someone's life. I came here because mine was nearly destroyed. And because my daughter deserves to grow up in a world where people who hurt others, no matter what uniform they wear, are held accountable. That clip would go viral within the hour. What followed was nothing short of a ripple across the nation. Communities held forums. Schools invited Derek to speak. Advocacy groups began pushing for stronger oversight laws for law enforcement. And the phrase "flex in court," crushed by the judge, became a social media movement. Used to call out abuses of power and uplift stories of justice being served. But there were other changes too. The city launched an independent police accountability board with real teeth, civilian-led, and empowered to investigate complaints. Officer training programs were restructured with a stronger focus on de-escalation and community engagement. And most notably, 5 other citizens who had previously filed complaints against Halstead, who had felt ignored, dismissed, or silenced, suddenly found their voices heard. Investigations reopened. Stories re-examined. Halstead's conviction didn't just bring closure. It opened a door. Weeks passed. One afternoon, Derek visited Kayla's school. It was her career day. Kids walked around dressed like doctors, firefighters, astronauts. Kayla introduced her father to the class proudly. "This is my dad. He's a teacher. And he's also really brave." The kids clapped. One little boy asked, "Did you really go to court?" Derek nodded. "Yes, I did." "Were you scared?" "I was. But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing, even when you are." That night, Derek and Kayla shared milkshakes. The ones they never got to enjoy on that awful day. She grinned at him. "You're my hero, Daddy." He smiled. "You're mine." Elsewhere in the city, Vanessa was offered a new position, district civil rights prosecutor. She accepted, with one condition. She would form a special task force to investigate past abuse cases buried or dismissed. In an interview later that month, she was asked why she took the job. Because this isn't just about courtrooms. It's about neighborhoods. It's about trust. And it's about making sure justice isn't rare, it's routine. Months later, a documentary team approached Derek. They wanted to tell the full story. He agreed, but only if the focus remained on the larger picture. Not just his trauma, but the transformation. The documentary aired under the title, "The Day the Badge Broke." It drew millions of views. Schools showed it in classrooms. Communities used it as a springboard for conversations. And yet, through it all, Derek remained grounded. He returned to teaching. He took Kayla to the park. He fixed things around the house. He lived, not as a symbol, but as a father, a man, and a survivor. One day, while walking downtown, a young man stopped him. "You probably don't remember me," he said, "but I went to the protest after your verdict. I saw the video. I used to think things like that didn't happen, or that people exaggerated. But now I know better. And I just want to say, thank you for standing up." Derek shook his hand. "Thank you for listening." And that was it. Justice didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the scars or bring back lost time. But it sparked a change, a small but significant turning point. Because one man refused to be silent. Because a brave lawyer refused to back down. Because a little girl told the truth with a stuffed bunny in her hand. And because sometimes the system can bend under the pressure of people who won't let it break us anymore. Thank you for watching this story unfold. If it moved you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that matter. Let your voice be part of the change. Tap that subscribe button, and let's keep shining a light where others try to keep it dark.